Fried chicken sandwiches are one of my favorite fast food items of all time, and the endless flavor variations that are possible for fried chicken in general make it a good fit for this channel's overall theme of culinary summarization. However, most of what I'm going to discuss today is going to focus on the different ways that you can dredge and fry your chicken rather than focusing on an individual flavor profile like my previous videos, since you can really dress your chicken with whatever sauce that you want, not just the random examples that I'm going to provide in this video. If you want to jump straight to the cooking process, you can skip to this timestamp, or you can check the description for the individual flavor profiles. But otherwise, let's talk about chicken and starch. Before we even cover the different ways you can dredge and fry your meat, I need to reiterate the importance of salting your chicken sufficiently and early enough, especially if you're using a tougher cut like chicken breast instead of thighs. Ever wonder why your Chick-fil-A and Popeye sandwiches are so juicy despite being relatively thick in proportion? It's because they salt their meat, and more importantly, they let that salt soak in for several hours before dredging and frying the chicken cutlets. Salt not only breaks down the connective proteins in meat, but it also helps to keep the moisture inside from evaporating out when cooking. It is by far the most important ingredient in any non-dessert dish, and the lack of sufficient salt is by far the most common mistake I see most people make when first learning to cook for themselves. For all of the recipes in this video, I tell you to salt your chicken at least an hour ahead of time and up to overnight, which basically makes it a dry brine. But if you're truly in a rush, you can obviously just season right before breading and cooking. Just be aware that your end result will not be as juicy. With that out of the way, let's discuss the basic method for dredging your chicken cutlets, as well as some additional steps that you can take to make your end result crispier and more flavorful. The classic southern method is to first brine your chicken in a salted buttermilk mixture, and then simply dredge it in a seasoned flour mixture. The purpose of a buttermilk brine is so that the acidity of the buttermilk acts in conjunction with the salt to further tenderize and flavor the chicken, as well as providing a thick, viscous liquid surface upon which the flour dredge can stick to. This is a great conceptual foundation for how to dredge chicken, but there are multiple small details that you can implement to really take your fried chicken to the next level of crispiness. The easiest step you can take to make your chicken crispier is to simply pour some of your buttermilk brine into your flour dredge first, so that the droplets form small pieces of breading that can then stick to your chicken cutlets. This alone greatly increases the texture contrast compared to chicken pieces that are simply covered in a thin, even layer of flour. It also happens naturally to your flour mixture as you bread more and more cutlets, since there will no doubt be excess brine that drips off of the chicken pieces as you put them into your flour dredge, creating those small pieces of flour that then become extra crispy pieces in the subsequent cutlets that get breaded in the same mixture. Doing this intentionally and ahead of time just makes sure that every single cutlet gets the same crispy bits of breading rather than just the last few. A small side note, if you're like me or most people and you don't regularly keep buttermilk in your fridge, and you don't want to run to the store just to pick up one ingredient that you don't regularly have, you can easily substitute it with regular milk and a splash of vinegar instead, as you really just need some form of acid to further tenderize the chicken, as well as some sort of liquid coating that the flour dredge can stick to, which buttermilk does both. Ethan Cholbowski and Jake and G. Lopez Alt both have fried chicken recipes that don't require the use of buttermilk, and so I'll leave them linked in the description as usual for you guys to follow. The next technique you can use to make your chicken crispier is to mix in some form of starch to your flour mixture. Cornstarch, which most people already have in their pantry, is perfectly fine for this application, but if you want a slightly lighter coating, take a page out of South Korea's book and use potato starch. In fact, in some Korean fried chicken recipes I've seen, some people omit the flour entirely and only use potato starch, which gives the final chicken cutlets an incredibly crunchy texture that can't be replicated with a flour diluted mixture. Some would argue that this is going too far and that it needs to be balanced with some flour, but for my personal taste, I love not only the texture that results from using all potato starch, but also the simplicity of simply dumping one of these into a large Tupperware and then dumping my chicken into that and shaking everything around. This brings up the next point I wanted to talk about, which is the actual method in which people dredge their chicken. You can use a large mixing bowl, you can use multiple plates if you're making something like Japanese Katsu cutlets, or you can do what I do and use a large Tupperware with tight-fitting lids so that you can shake everything around. This method is not only the easiest way to ensure even and complete coverage of your chicken, but it also reduces waste and mess since everything is contained with the lid and you're not actually pressing the flour on by hand. In my opinion, it's the superior method for dredging chicken in almost all aspects. I mentioned Japanese Katsu cutlets just now, which introduces an alternative method for breading chicken or protein in general, which is the three-stage process of flour, beaten eggs, and panko breadcrumbs. While this is done traditionally with pork cutlets, you can absolutely use this method with chicken to obtain a unique crunchy texture compared to a traditional flour dredging. This is very similar to the method used in Italian-American food when making chicken parmesan, only grated cheese is added to the breadcrumbs for additional flavor. So for the Japanese and Italian variations of this dish, I'll be using this breadcrumb method just to demonstrate the endless variety that is possible with such a simple concept as fried chicken. Finally, we're going to talk about Korea again, since in my opinion, they've definitely perfected fried chicken the most compared to any other country. We can take 3 more techniques from the masters: wet batter coating instead of dry coating, double frying, and saucing your fried chicken in a pan. Many Korean fried chicken places will coat their chicken with a wet batter instead of a dry coating, which ultimately results in a lighter, glassier texture that shatters on impact instead of crunching. If you've had good fish and chips before, then you know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, choosing between a wet coating and a dry coating is up to your personal texture preferences, and for me, I usually just go with a dry breading since it's less hassle and cleanup, but I do enjoy the texture of a fried wet batter coating, just not enough to always justify doing it instead. Double frying is a concept that's pretty familiar to people who've made French fries before, as it makes the potatoes have an extremely crispy exterior while still maintaining a soft and fluffy interior. Double frying chicken gives similar results, as allowing the chicken to cool down after the first fry allows for some of the moisture that is still inside the breading to move outwards, and that moisture is then eliminated with the second fry while still keeping the chicken inside nice and juicy. Kenji and Aaron and Claire have recipes that use the wet batter method, and Monchi has a recipe that uses the double frying method, all of which I'll leave linked down in the description. These recipes all assume that you're going to be making chicken wings or chicken bites, but they can easily be adapted to a sandwich form factor, which I'll demonstrate in the recipe portion of this video by combining the wet batter coating with a double fry, and the third technique I wanted to talk about, which is the saucing of the fried chicken cutlets in a hot pan with a sweet and spicy sauce that was thrown together while the chicken was still cooking. This technique of pan frying allows for the sauce to completely cover every nook and cranny of the fried chicken, while the previous 2 techniques prevent the sauce from making the chicken soggy. Basically, everything comes together to create something incredibly crispy while covered in incredibly flavorful sauce that doesn't make the chicken soggy. Before we move on to the actual recipe, I do want to discuss taste modalities in this context just for a little bit, especially in relation to the toppings that you could put on a sandwich like this. Just like in my rice bowl video, having an assortment of random accoutrements to top your sandwich with will greatly help to improve texture, flavor, and visual contrast, as well as making the end result look prettier and feel fancier. In the case of something that is so forward in the salty and umami taste modality components like fried chicken, adding a sour and sweet taste modality component as well as something spicy will greatly help to balance the flavors out, which is a topic that I touched on in my previous video when comparing amatriciana and its tomatoes with the other 3 Roman pasta dishes. For a fried chicken sandwich, you could add toppings such as pickles, pickled onions, kimchi coleslaw, or a random sweet and spicy sauce, and you can also add sauce to your buns if you want even more flavor complexity, although most of the versions that I'm going to show you guys how to make will already have heavily sauced the chicken cutlets themselves. Finally, this is not topping related, but still important, always toast your buns, please. It adds additional flavor through the Maillard reaction and also helps to prevent your buns from getting soggy. We're going to start with a basic southern style fried chicken sandwich, since you can use this version as well as the Korean version in the next section as the baseline cutlet that you can then cover in whatever sauce you want after frying, since the seasonings in the brine and dredge for both are optional. Kenji has a classic southern fried chicken recipe that you can easily adapt to a sandwich form factor, but he also has recipes for a Chick-fil-A copycat, as well as a 5-ingredient fried chicken sandwich that still sticks to some traditional techniques. I'll leave all 3 linked in the description, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to be roughly following the 5-ingredient version with slight modifications from the 2 more complex recipes, as well as mentioning when and where you can make it more complicated for better flavor if you're not saucing. Heavily salt and optionally pepper however many boneless, skinless chicken thighs or horizontally halved boneless, skinless chicken breasts that you want on both sides, and transfer to a gallon Ziploc bag. Pour in enough buttermilk or regular milk with a splash of vinegar to completely cover all of your chicken, and place in the refrigerator for at least 1 hour if using thighs, and at least 4 hours if using breasts, and up to overnight for both. You can optionally add whatever traditional seasonings you want if you're not going to sauce your final cutlet, such as paprika, cayenne, black pepper, garlic powder, or oregano. Pour some flour into a large Tupperware container and optionally add some cornstarch at a 1:3 ratio compared to the flour for some additional crispiness. You can again add salt and the other traditional southern style seasonings to the flour mixture if you want to. Once your chicken is sufficiently brined, remove from the fridge and pour some of the buttermilk into the flour mixture to form flour chunks that will become extra crispy pieces on the actual cutlets. Remove each chicken piece from the bag and place into the Tupperware, making sure that the first side of each piece makes full contact with the flour mixture. Put the lid on tightly and vigorously shake the entire container until each chicken piece is completely coated in the flour. Heat some high heat frying oil in a wok, cast iron, or Dutch oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Fry no more than 4 pieces at a single time for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side, while maintaining a temperature between 300 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit. While the chicken is cooking, toast some burger buns on another pan with oil or butter. If you're not saucing your cutlets, you can still sauce your buns with whatever you want, such as sriracha mayo or a standard burger sauce made from ketchup, mustard, relish, and mayonnaise. Basically, any sauce that uses mayo as a base will probably taste pretty good. I also like to put most of my toppings on the bottom bun whenever I make sandwiches or burgers, as the weight of the cutlet or patty helps to keep them in place rather than sliding around on top. For a simple fried chicken sandwich like this, a few pickle slices are classic, but red pickled onions are another great addition that you should definitely try. Ethan Cholbowski has an entire video dedicated to these, which I'll leave linked down below. Regardless, once you've cooked your chicken and you've let it drain on a wire rack or paper towels, all you have to do is put it on top of your toasted, sauced, and topped bun, and that's it. This by itself is a fantastic sandwich, but it also forms a great foundation that you can cover in whatever sauces that you want, the most harmonious of which is Nashville hot chicken sauce, which also plays really well with the traditional southern style spices if you already use them in the brine and dredge. All you have to do is put some cayenne, paprika, sugar, and garlic powder in a bowl with an emphasis on the cayenne, and then simply pour some of your hot frying oil into the bowl to make a spicy oil that you can then dunk your chicken into before putting it on your bun. Next, we're going to apply Korean fried chicken techniques to a baseline sandwich, which can also be covered in whatever sauce that you want. Again, heavily salt and optionally pepper however many boneless skinless chicken thighs or horizontally halved boneless skinless chicken breasts that you want on both sides, and transfer to a gallon Ziploc bag. Unlike the classic southern version, we won't be using buttermilk for this, and instead we'll just be dry brining the chicken with nothing but salt. Place in the refrigerator for at least 1 hour if using thighs, and at least 4 hours if using breasts, and up to overnight for both. You can optionally add whatever Korean seasonings you want if you're planning on using a Korean sauce for your final cutlet, such as rice vinegar, soy sauce, gochugaru, and minced garlic. Pour some cornstarch or potato starch into a large mixing bowl, and optionally pour an equal proportion of flour in as well. Add a small spoonful of baking powder for extra crispiness, as well as a large pinch of kosher salt. Regardless of whatever combination of dry ingredients you use, pour in an equal amount of water to the dry mixture and whisk together until smooth and homogeneous. The more viscous the mixture is, the thicker your final breading will be after frying, and vice versa, so adjust it to your personal preferences by adding more flour/starch or water respectively. Once your chicken is sufficiently dry brined, remove from the fridge and place all of the pieces directly into the bowl and mix around to fully submerge and cover every piece. Heat some high heat frying oil in a wok, cast iron, or Dutch oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Fry no more than 4 pieces at a single time for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side, while maintaining a temperature between 300 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove from the oil and let drain on a wire rack while you toast some burger buns on another pan with oil or butter. Once your buns are toasted, heat the oil back up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and fry each chicken cutlet a second time for another 3 to 4 minutes on each side. Again, remove the chicken from the oil and let drain on a wire rack before putting it on your buns. If you're planning on using this as your base sandwich for the other regional sauces, then you can stop here and skip ahead to whatever sauce that you're interested in. But if you fully want to lean into the Korean flavor profile, then you can sauce your buns with a simple sauce made from roughly equal parts kimchi and mayonnaise, or take it even further by turning the sauce into a kimchi coleslaw by adding chopped cabbage and a splash of rice vinegar. You can then cover your actual cutlets with a Korean flavored sauce. The most common one by far in most recipes is a combination of gochujang, soy sauce, rice vinegar, sugar, and minced garlic, which comprise the spicy, salty, sour, sweet, and umami taste modalities that I'm always harping on about on this channel. Just like my dandan mian sauce, I don't ever measure their proportions exactly and just eyeball according to my personal tastes. I know that I like my food to lean more towards spicy and sour, so I always go heavy with the gochujang and vinegar, but many people prefer a sweeter sauce, so add more sugar if you're one of those. Two other popular flavors include what is basically a Japanese teriyaki sauce, which Kenji has a recipe for that I'll link below, and honey butter sauce, which Manchi has a recipe for which I'll also link below. Pickles are also a great addition to this sandwich, but you can also use pickled daikon radish for a brighter hit of sweetness and crunch. Next, we're going to go over the very similar methods used for a Japanese style and an Italian American style fried chicken sandwich, or in other words, a chicken Katsu Sando and a chicken Parmesan hero, respectively. For both versions, heavily salt and optionally pepper your chicken on both sides and transfer it to a gallon Ziploc bag. Place in the refrigerator for at least 1 hour if using thighs, and at least 4 hours if using breasts, and up to overnight for both. On 3 separate plates, put a small amount of flour into the first one so that the bottom is covered, a few beaten eggs into the second one, about 1 egg for every 2 cutlets, and a package of panko breadcrumbs into the third one. You can use regular breadcrumbs if you want to be more traditional for the Italian-American version, but panko breadcrumbs are far superior in terms of crunchiness. For the Italian version, grate however much pecorino or Parmesan cheese you want into the breadcrumbs and mix it around until homogeneous. For both versions, once your chicken is sufficiently dry brined, remove it from the fridge and place all the pieces directly onto the first plate, making sure that the first side of each piece makes full contact with the flour. Press the flour into the chicken with a designated dry hand, making sure to get even and complete coverage of each piece. Then use that same dry hand to drop all of the chicken into the beaten eggs, and then use your other hand as your designated wet hand to completely coat all of the cutlets. Then use that wet hand to transfer all the chicken to the breadcrumbs, and then use your original dry hand to firmly press the panko into the surface of each cutlet until they're all completely covered. This dry hand, wet hand technique prevents you from breading your own fingers while making these and reduces the final mess that you have to clean up. Heat some high heat frying oil in a wok, cast iron, or Dutch oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Fry no more than 4 pieces at a single time for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side while maintaining a temperature between 300 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're making the Katsu Sando, toast some thick cut plain white bread or Japanese shokupan if you have it with some butter or oil. If you're making the Parmesan hero, first combine some softened butter and minced garlic along with a pinch of salt, and then spread the mixture all over the inside of a hoagie roll before toasting it as well. Additionally, for a Parm hero, you'll want some kind of tomato sauce. You can use store-bought pasta sauce if you have a jar on hand, but once again, I have a bunch of tomato paste that I need to get rid of, so I simply sauteed some garlic and onions with a pinch of salt in some olive oil for a few minutes before adding an entire small can of tomato paste and a cup of water for a very basic sauce. For both versions, remove the chicken from the oil and let drain on a wire rack. For the Katsu Sando, spread some Japanese mayonnaise on both pieces of bread and place some shredded cabbage on the bottom slice. Top with your chicken katsu and then drizzle some tonkatsu sauce on top, followed by the other slice of bread. For the Parmesan hero, turn on your broiler and place the chicken on the bottom of the hoagie. Top with either shredded low moisture mozzarella or a few slices of fresh mozzarella and place under the broiler for a few minutes until fully melted. Top with a spoonful of the tomato sauce and close the hoagie. Finally, for the Chinese flavor variation, we're going to revisit the dandan mian sauce, but apply it to a Korean fried chicken cutlet and Korean saucing method. While you're frying your chicken, preferably with the Korean method outlined earlier in this video, pour some soy sauce, Chinese Chungking black vinegar, sugar, and chili oil into a pan according to your flavor preferences over low heat. Once your chicken is fully cooked and drained over a wire rack, transfer to the pan and toss to fully coat each piece with sauce. Toast some burger buns with oil or butter and optionally spread some peanut butter onto each one if you really want to play into the dandan mian theme of this version. Place your chicken cutlet on the bottom bun and top with some chopped scallions and toasted sesame seeds. I've never seen anyone do anything like this before, so I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but this was actually really good and definitely something I would make again. You could also use this flavor profile with the southern fried chicken cutlet instead of the Korean version, but I just thought that the two Asian cuisines would synergize better together, which is why I chose to use the Korean method as the foundation for this sandwich.